أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المرسلين وعلى صحبه أجمعين ومن اتبع لسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته يا أيها الإخوة والأخوات. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We return to our lessons of Akhdari, the abridgment of Imam al-Akhdari in morals, purification, and in prayer. Alhamdulillah, we just finished in 12 lessons the section on morals, and the section that relates to what is obligatory for a mukallaf to engage in and what is obligatory for a mukallaf to refrain from. And it involved things such as backbiting, it involved things such as pride, it involved things such as sitting with a fasiq, an open sinner, and other than that, from these actions that are considered necessary for a person to be morally refined. We have to remember that Islam is not simply belief, and it's not simply actions. Rather, it is sound belief accompanied by sound actions. And this is what he's teaching you as far as the actions that relate to character. Now, inshallah, he's about to get into the actions that relate to worship. Actions are not just related to that which we do with human beings. Some people, they say to themselves, oh, if I'm a good person, why is it necessary for me to worship God? Well, if God exists and he dictates to you that this is the way I want you to praise me, this is the way I want you and our relationship to occur, then by necessity you have to accommodate that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to explain how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to be worshipped. And by virtue of that, we learn these activities and these actions so that we can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by virtue of our actions. So inshallah, the first section, and you'll find this to be the first section in every single book, is Faslun fit Tahara, is a chapter on purity. Because without purity, there is no prayer, and without prayer, a person's Islam is not sound. The prayer of a person without Tahara is not accepted. When we say purity, purity and cleanliness are not the same thing. Cleanliness is a general term that refers to any time a person wants to remove dirt from his or herself, whether it's through showering, whether it's through bathing, whatever the case might be. That's a general human activity. A person has to be clean. Tahara is a specific state of being by virtue of performing specific actions with water that removes a specific state from a person of impurity and allows a person to do specific acts of worship, such as prayer, such as reading the Quran, such as making tawaf around the Kaaba. So that's what's known as Tahara. It's purity, it involves cleanliness, but it's not simply limited to cleanliness. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The author, he says, الطهارة قسمان. He says the purity is of two types, that there is two types. The first is طهارة حدث, is purity from what's known as hadath. Hadath are events that occur that render a person into a state of impurity. They are not the impurity itself, although during the process of a hadith occurring, impurity may come out. So for example, a person goes to urinate. That is something that's hadith. The urine itself is not the hadith. The process of urinating is the hadith. That's the event that occurs that makes a person ritually impure. A person goes to defecate. Meaning to go number two. The defecation itself is impure, but the hadith is the act of defecating, such that even if a person cleans his back passage from defecation or his front passage from urine, that state of impurity still remains. So this is what's known as hadith, and a person has to remove the hadith before he can pray. The second is taharatu khabath, is a tahara that comes by virtue of being pure from the actual filth itself. Khabath linguistically means something that's filthy, something that's unclean. So the urine itself is unclean. The feces itself is unclean. So if a person, for example, urinates and doesn't clean the urine, even if he makes wudu, he's still in a state of hadith. If a person defecates and still has defecation like feces in the back of their bum, and they don't clean it and they go to make wudu, they can't pray like that because it's khabath on them. Likewise, taharatu hadith, the hadith, if a person urinates and they clean their private parts, the khabith is gone, but the hadith is still there because they are in a state of impurity, and purity can only be gained by performing wudu. So the purity is of two types. Istaharatu min al-hadath is to have tahara after the occurrence of hadith, these events that render a person impure. And these include urinating, they include defecating, they include farting, they include a heavy, deep sleep. You understand? And they include sexual intercourse. But sexual intercourse makes a person to a state of major ritual impurity, and that makes it that a person requires ghusl and not just wudu. And we'll touch on that later. So these are what's known as the ahdath. These are the events that make a person into a state of khabath, into a state of hadith. And khabath, the filthy things, are those things that are filthy in of themselves. So if a person has it on his body, on his clothes, or on his prayer place, he has to remove them before he can pray. He says, وَلَا يَصِحُّ الْجَمِيعُ إِلَّا بِالْمَاءِ الطَّاهِرِ الْمُطَهِّرِ. He said it's not possible to obtain tahara from hadith or tahara from khabas except with water that is tahir, that is pure in of itself, and that's al-mutahhir, and that is purifying. Water can be pure in the sense that you can use it for cooking, you can use it for drinking, you can use it for anything that's related to the normal human activities. So if I take a bucket of water and I put some soap in it, it's pure because soap in itself is pure. But it's not mutahhir, it doesn't purify. And he's going to tell you why. He said, water that's pure and purifying, he says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي, that's the type of water, لَمْ يَتَغَيَّرَ لَوْنُهُ, whose color, أو طعمه, or its taste, أو رائحته, or its smell has not changed. بما يفارقه غالبا, by virtue of something that does not normally occur in it. So in order for you to lift hadith or khabas, the water has to be water that smell, its taste, and its color has not changed by virtue of something being put into it that's not normally part of it. He says, kazait, such as oil. If you put oil inside of water, oil doesn't normally come with water, so you cannot make wudu with that water. What dasam, or such as something like with saman, or such as fat, or ghee, like the ghee that the Pakistanis and Indians they cook with. If you mix that with water, that water you can't use it for tahara. You can't use it to make wudu. You can't use it for ghusl. But the water is pure. It's tahir, but it's not purifying. It's not mutahhir. What dasam, likewise, you can't use it. You can if like grime falls into it, you can't use that. Kullihi, astaghfirullah, with dasam, and all types of like grease, like the grease that comes from animals and things of that nature. If that falls into it, the water is still pure, but it's not purifying. You understand? Wal wadakh, likewise, if any type of filth falls into the water, it's not normally a part of the water, you can't use that water to make wudu or ghusl. Well, saboon, or soap, if soap falls into the water, you can't use that water for the purpose of obtaining tahara. And remember what he had said is that if any of these things falls into the water, it's not necessarily that off the bat that it changes the how do you call it? It changes the purity of it. It has to be to the extent that it changes the smell, it changes the taste, and it changes the color. So for example, soap, a drop of soap falls into water, but the water still tastes like water, it still smells like water, and it doesn't have a soapy color to it, you can use that water, because that means it's still pure and purifying. But the moment that one of these three attributes they change, you can no longer use that water to make wudu with or to do ghusl with. But you can use that water to shower. You can shower with it. There's nothing wrong with that. but making wudu with that water won't be acceptable. You understand? He says, wal wadak, and likewise, fat and grease, wa nahwihi, anything like that, meaning anything that's pure, it's like sugar or honey or milk, anything that's pure, but it's not normally part of water. If you put it inside of water and it mixes to the point where it changes the water's taste, it changes the water's smell, or it changes the water's color, then you can't use that water to make wudu, you can't use it to make ghusl, you can't use it to obtain tahara. You understand? But you can use it for anything that's like normal activities. You understand? He says, وَلَا بَأْسْ, there's no problem بِالتُّرَابِ, if mud mixes with water, if dust or ground mixes with water and changes the color of the water, it changes its taste or changes its color or its smell, because dust and water normally come together. You understand? If you go to a pond, you'll find that water, or if you go to the beach, if you find, you take your hand, there's water comes with the dust. You're gonna pick up dust. So it's not something that's something that's normally part of water. Walham'a, or mud, likewise the same thing as mud. If water touches mud and it changes the color of the water, or it changes the taste of the water, or it changes the smell of the water, it's okay to make wudu with that water, because water and mud, they naturally occur together. You'll find that it naturally occurs. Wal sabakha, or salt. If you go to the ocean, if you go to certain places in the ocean, like the water is so salty you can actually see the salt, right? If you go to the ocean, you taste the water, it's salty as heck. So if salt comes into water and the water tastes salty, or the water looks a bit white, or the water smells salty, you can still use that water to make wudu. Understand? Or likewise, wal ajur, like the plaster that the water is contained in, for example. If because of that, the water over time, the color becomes a bit plastery, or it becomes a bit, a bit off because of what it's mixed with, then there's no issue with that. You can still use that. وَالنَّحْوِهِ, and the likes of that, from that which naturally comes with water. So the things that water naturally comes with, if they mix with the water, and the water, because of that, it changes color, or it changes taste, or it changes smell, then that has no bearing on your ability to use that water for wudu. But if the water is mixed with something that's not normally part of it, and it mixes with that thing, and that thing causes its smell, or its taste, or its color, one of those three, or all of them, or two of them, if it causes those things to change, then that water is no longer usable for the purpose of making wudu or making ghusl, meaning it's no longer usable for the purpose of obtaining tahara. The water would still be tahir, meaning it's pure, but it wouldn't be mutahhir, it wouldn't be purifying. Water that's tahir and mutahhir, it's known as tahur. That's water that combines both of these properties. That's water that combines both of these properties. You understand? And here he doesn't mention that if something filthy falls into the water. If something filthy falls into the water, such as urine, such as feces, such as sperm, then what would happen is that so long as the taste and the smell and the color of the water doesn't change, the water is still usable, but it's disliked, because you know for a fact that some type of impurity has been placed in there. And that's if the water is not a small amount. If the water is a small amount and impurity falls into it, then it's haram to use that water. You shouldn't use that water to make wudu with, because it's filthy. You understand? So to review, he says to us that purity is of two types. There's the purity from hadath, which is purity from the events that occur that place a person to a state of impurity, such as urinating, defecating, falling into a deep sleep, fainting, farting, things of that nature. Wa taharatu khabath, and tahara from filth itself, meaning removing feces and urine and sperm from your clothes, your body, or the place that you're going to pray. That's taharatul khabas. And he says that removing either of these is not possible except with water that's tahir, that's pure, and that's mutahhir, and that's purifying. And this is water that's known as tahur. He said, and that water is water that has not changed in terms of its color, in terms of its taste, or in terms of its smell, due to something being mixed with it that's not normally part of it. And he gives you the example of oil, of fat, of grease, of filth, of soap, and of like ghee and fat like that. Things that are, or honey and sugar, milk, perfume. All of these things are pure, but once you put them in water and it changes those three elements, then the water becomes pure but not purifying. And he says that there's no problem when the water mixes with something that's normally part of it, such as dust, like dirt, right? Like when I say dirt, I don't mean like filth. I mean dirt in the sense of like the dirt that's on the ground. You understand? Wal ham'a, or mud, wal sabakha, or salt, wal ajur, or plaster, the container that the water is in that causes the water to change over time, wal nahwihi, and things like that. So those things, there's no issue with that water. Inshallah, it's important to know these things because of the fact that purity is the base element of being able to pray properly. The ulama, the scholars, they say that if a person, he properly performs the wudu and he stays in a state of purity, then that person's prayer is going to reflect that, and that person's state of mind is going to reflect a certain tranquility that comes about from being in a state of purity. Inshallah, jazakumullah khair. May Allah reward you guys. We'll end it here. Assalamu alaikum.